Hi, this is Reading Rails and I'm Mike Verotostone, and today I'm going to see what makes the router tick in Rails. So I have a brand new Rails application and I just opened up the routes, and so I wanted to see how does this all work, and I don't know how far I'm going to dig, but let's get started. So first thing is I'm just going to work my way backwards from draw and see where that takes me. So I have a buffer in Emacs here that is in my Rails checkout, and I'm just going to get grep for def draw and just see if anything crops up. Okay, so we got a few things here. We have action pack seems to be where it's at, and we have some tests, route set and inspector. So route set seems to be where def draw is, as the rest is all tests, and in the inspector these are not just raw draw methods. So I think this is the file we want to look at. So I'm just going to go ahead and open this up in my browser to make it nice and easy to see. So let's see, we have action pack and then lib action dispatch, then routing and route set. Okay. Okay, so see if I can find the def draw. Here it is. So this clears unless disable clear and finalize, which I imagine probably resets the router. So when you're drawing the routes, if you've already drawn them, then anything that gets drawn probably gets removed. We could probably see if we can figure that out by just looking for def clear. Yep, see, it looks like everything gets cleared. Alright, then eval block, finalize, and then nil. So let's see what finalize does before we go into the meat of evaluating the block. So does nothing if it's already finalized. Pen.each block eval block. So that's probably some kind of, like, if you have a bunch of routes you want to append to after all your routes, then it just evals those at the end, and then we're finalized after that. And that brings us to eval block, which is right here. So if block arity is 1, meaning there's one argument to this block, raise you are using the old router DSL, which has been removed in Rails 3.1. Please check how to update your routes file at, and then a link to how to update that. Okay, so it creates a new mapper, whatever that is, and then if we're in default scope, whatever that means, then mapper with default scope, else mapper.instance exec. Okay, and then the method's private. So I just wonder, seeing that, why this method is marked private rather than a private, section of the code. Is there no such section? That's marked private explicitly. And we're getting deep into this class. So, so I wonder if that's just maybe this class is too big to have a private block that would make much sense. So then the methods are individually marked private, or maybe there's some meaning to the order that these are created in. I'm not quite sure. So eval block And then, all right, so it looks like the mapper is the core object that's doing all the stuff here. So it's instantiated with the router itself, and then the block is passed on to the mapper. So let's take a look at the mapper then. So let me just open up a new tab, and there we are, mapper. All right, so initialize app constraints dispatcher P. So so it's initialized with just self, yet there's 3 arguments here. Oh no, I'm looking at constraints, wrong thing. All right. See if we can find the initialize of the mapper. Hopefully we're in the right file. I have no idea where it is. All right, let's just search for def initialize, and hopefully we'll run across it. So this was that first one. Yeah. All right, this looks like the initialize we're looking at. It takes 1 argument, which is the route set, which is that class we were looking at just now, and initializes a bunch of stuff. All right. Okay, and then instance exec or with default scope. So let's just look at, I imagine we're probably in the default scope initially, so maybe we should take a look at with default scope. And here we are. Scope instance exec block. All right. So then that all just gets instance execs, and if I remember correctly, instance exec is a method in Ruby, not in Rails. There it is. Executes the given block with the context of the receiver object. In order to set the context, the variable self is set to object while the code is executing, giving the code access to objects instance variables. Arguments are passed as block parameters. All right, so I think the purpose there is so that any method invoked in here gets processed as if it were this object. So if we go back to our routes.rb, we can see in the examples these root, get, etc. All these methods are then going to get passed on to whatever this is instance is exec. So I'm curious what this scope does before we continue. So let's just look for def scope. Okay, so scoping. Is scoping included in our? Yes, it is, but I do see. Okay, so that's not scope. Okay, let's go back to where we were. All right, so scope's a set of routes to the given default options. Take the following route definition as an example. So scope, path, do resources projects. This generates helpers such as account projects path, just like resources does. The difference here being that the routes generated are like account ID projects rather than accounts account ID projects. Okay, so so then what is this default scope doing? So let's take a look at the default scope back here. Is it just a def default scope? No. Well, what is it? Okay, it's an adder accessor. All right. Well, I guess the default scope is set up beforehand, before this thing is initialized. So, is there anything we can glean off of this? Yeah. Okay, well, one thing I do see is that this simply yields the block. It's not trying to instance eval the block or anything like that. Which means that if we go back to where we were, or I guess that was, where was that? Scope. Instance exec. There we go, with default scope. Okay, and then if we go back here, this was instance exec when we're not in the when there isn't a default scope. Okay, so that means that our mapper here contains all the routing methods, and this is let's see. Ooh, HTTP helpers. This looks familiar here. So if we, oh man, this is a big file. HTTP helpers, okay, that's kind of cool. So that gets included in our mapper here. And so that's the familiar get, post, patch. And those just simply call map method. And so it's going to map method, so put, delete, etc. It's going to map that method, get the args block, okay, extract any options out of there, which I imagine just takes the options hash at the end. Looks for a via. And then it just calls match. So when you're calling put, patch, etc., that's just glorified match. Which I believe match is something even described in here. No, I guess not. Okay, never mind. All right. Well, let's just see if we can see what match is. Okay, here's a match. I don't know if that's the match. Matches. Ooh, that's an empty definition. That intrigues me. Base. So the base implementation does nothing? I guess maybe you're expected to implement this if you're trying to write your own router, maybe? This looks like the meat of it, but what is this? It's going to even be all that easy to see where I am. Okay, singleton resource. Is that what I'm in? No. Is it? No. I think it's above that. Resources. Okay. Resource routing. So go back to here. Resources included. Okay. So this does appear to be the method that gets called when you say get or whatever. And we've been going on a while and we haven't really gotten into any meaningful stuff, but I think we've started to glean how the routing works. So this mapper appears to be the object that does the meat of stuff, and maybe next week we'll dive more into how routing works. But thank you for watching, and if you like what you saw, go ahead and like this video, and if you really liked it, go ahead and subscribe.